Perez decided their YouTube channel needed more views. Their wholesome family videos weren't working, so they switched to pranks. The numbers went up. Pedro figured if pranks worked, extreme pranks would work even better. So he came up with a simple test. See if a book could stop a bullet. He would hold a 1.5-inch encyclopedia to his chest. Mona Lisa would shoot it from 1 foot away. Simple. They set up cameras and invited over 30 friends to watch. The gun they chose was a Desert Eagle, one of the most powerful handguns in the world. She pulled the trigger. The bullet went straight through the book and killed Pedro instantly. Mona Lisa called the police and claimed she'd accidentally shot her boyfriend. The footage said otherwise. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter and got 180 days in prison. The video went viral worldwide, just not how they planned. Who wants some of this? It was 2004 in Wales when a young man invited friends back to his apartment after a night of heavy drinking. The party continued at his place, and that's when he got a brilliant idea. He pulled down his trousers and stuck himself out the window, yelling, "Who wants some of this?" to the street below. His friends grabbed him before he could fall out of the 3-story window. The next morning, he admitted it had been pretty stupid. He promised he'd never do anything like that again. That very evening, he was drunk again. And once again, he pulled down his trousers and started yelling, "Who wants some of this?" out the window. This time, his friends weren't close enough to grab him. He tumbled out of the 3-story window and died on impact. The Patriotic Hat. On July 4th, 2024, in Summerville, South Carolina, Alan Ray McGrew decided to take his patriotic costume to the next level. The 41-year-old HVAC technician was hosting a neighborhood block party, dressed in a red, white, and blue Uncle Sam outfit with a top hat. The drinking had started around 6 p.m. Fireworks were planned for the evening. Alan loved his country and looked forward to celebrating each year. At around 10:20 p.m., Alan placed a large firework right on top of his Uncle Sam hat. His wife Paige thought he was just messing around. Surely he wouldn't light something on his head. He had already lit it. The firework exploded and caused what paramedics called massive head trauma. Alan was dead instantly. He had become his own fireworks display. The DIY bungee jump. On July 12, 1997, Eric Barsha decided to go bungee jumping on his day off. The 22-year-old fast food worker couldn't find any bungee jumping places in the area, so he figured he'd do it himself. He picked a railroad bridge in Lake Accotink Park, Virginia. It was 70 feet high, perfect for a homemade bungee jump. Eric tied together several bungee cords and reinforced them with duct tape. He was really thinking about safety. He tied one end around his leg and the other to the bridge. Then he jumped. There was just one problem with his plan. Eric never considered that bungee cords stretch when you fall. The cords he'd tied together were already a few feet shorter than the bridge height. When they stretched, they became even longer than the distance to the ground. Eric hit the pavement 70 feet below with such force that he died instantly. A local man found his body the next morning with the bungee cord still attached to his leg. His grandmother told reporters he was always so smart in school. The fish that fought back. In 1998, a man from Ohio was hanging out with his friend when he got dared to do something stupid. His friend was cleaning out a fish tank and said that one of the fish, about 5 inches long, had been eating all the other fish. The man decided to give this fish payback. He would swallow it whole. He had done this trick before. He picked up the fish and held it over his mouth. Then he gulped it down. The fish fought back. It got stuck in his throat and was too slippery to pull out. He couldn't breathe and struggled for several minutes while his friend called 911. When paramedics got there, the man was dead, but the fish was still alive with its tail sticking out of his mouth. Both the man and the fish died. The fake robbery. On January 18, 1977, Italian footballer Luciano Recchiaconi had a brilliant idea. The 28-year-old Lazio player, known as the Blonde Angel, was famous for his pranks. Recchiaconi and his teammate Pietro Gadin decided to stage a fake robbery at their friend Bruno Tabacini's jewelry store in Rome. They thought it would be funny to scare Bruno and then laugh about it later. They covered their faces and walked into the store with guns out, yelling, "Hands in the air! This is a stick-up!" There was one problem with their plan. The jewelry store had been robbed just a few weeks earlier. Bruno was scared it would happen again, so he had gotten a shotgun to protect himself. When Bruno saw the robbers, he pulled out his shotgun. Pietro immediately put his hands up, but Recchiaconi kept going with the prank. He wouldn't put his gun down. Bruno was scared and shot Recchiaconi in the chest from close range. Recchiaconi's last words were, "It's a joke! It's just a joke!" But it was too late. He died 30 minutes later at 28 years old, leaving behind his wife and 2 kids. Bruno Tabacini was arrested and held for 18 days before being released without charge. It was declared that the death was the result of self-defense and a terrible accident. The Sleeping Bear. In 1906, A young hunter in Pennsylvania was out hunting when he found a huge black bear lying on the ground. The bear looked dead, and the hunter thought he got lucky. He found a free bear without having to shoot it. So he got out his knife and started cutting up the animal right away. There was just one problem. The hunter never checked if the bear was really dead. He just started cutting. The bear wasn't dead. It was sleeping. When the hunter started cutting it, the bear woke up angry. It attacked and tore the hunter to pieces. The hunter died right there. The scooter duel. In 2004, two Taiwanese college students met up one evening and had a few drinks. After talking, they both found out they liked the same girl on campus. This got them upset, and they decided to have a contest to see who would get the right to ask her out. How did they settle this? Rock, paper, scissors? A coin flip? Nope. They decided to joust like knights, but instead of horses, they would use their scooters. The rules were simple. They would ride straight at each other at full speed, and whoever turned away first would lose. So without helmets or any safety gear, the two rode their scooters directly at each other, hitting 50 miles per hour. Neither one wanted to be the first to chicken out. They crashed head-on. Both of them died. Later, someone asked the girl about it. She said she wasn't interested in either of them anyway. They both died for nothing. The water thief. On April 19, 2022, Easter Monday in Italy, a 46-year-old man was thirsty. All the stores were closed for the holiday, so he broke into a grocery store to get some water. He found a huge tower of water bottle boxes stacked up by the workers. Instead of taking a bottle from the shelf, he decided to pull one from the middle of the stack. Anyone who's played Jenga knows this is a bad idea. He grabbed a bottle from a box right in the middle of the tower. The whole thing came down on top of him. The man got crushed under all that water and died right away. Store workers found the mess the next day when they came to work. They started cleaning up the fallen boxes and lifting them one by one. When they lifted the first box, an arm stuck out. The police watched security camera footage to see what happened. The man had broken in just to get a drink and got killed by the water he was trying to steal. The unbreakable window. Gary Hoy was a lawyer in Toronto. He worked on the 24th floor and had a weird habit. Whenever law students visited his firm, Gary liked to show them how strong the windows were by running across his office and slamming his whole body into the window. Gary had done this dozens of times. The windows never broke. On July 9, 1993, Gary was giving law students a tour. "These windows can't break," he said. He ran backward and threw himself at the window. It worked perfectly. He bounced right off. Feeling good, Gary decided to do it again. This time, the glass didn't break, but the whole window popped out of its frame. Gary went flying 24 stories down, riding the window all the way to the street. The law students and his co-workers watched in horror. Gary had hit that window so many times over the years that he'd loosened the frame. He died instantly. Hold your Wii for a Wii. In 2007, Jennifer Strange heard about a radio contest in Sacramento. The 28-year-old mother of three wanted to win a Nintendo Wii for her kids. The contest was called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. You had to drink water and hold it in without using the bathroom. Jennifer showed up with about 20 other contestants. They started drinking bottle after bottle of water. As hours went by, contestants dropped out to use the bathroom. Jennifer held on. After several hours, Jennifer started throwing up, but she didn't quit. Jennifer won the contest and got her Nintendo Wii. She went home feeling terrible. The next day, she called in sick with a massive headache. A few hours later, Jennifer was dead. She had died from water intoxication. Too much water made her brain swell up. Her 3 children lost their mother over a video game. Her family sued the radio station and won $16.5 million. Road Rage Showdown. In 2021, 2 drivers crashed on Interstate 80 in Berkeley. Nobody got hurt, but both drivers got out to argue about it. They didn't pull over. They started yelling at each other right in the middle of the highway. Cars were flying by. The 2 men kept shouting and making threats. Then a Mini Cooper came down the road. The driver swerved to avoid the damaged cars, but couldn't miss the 2 idiots fighting in traffic. The Mini Cooper hit both of them. They both died instantly. The Mini Cooper driver was traumatized. The umbrella trick. Back in 1999, a bizarre story out of Bonn, Germany made headlines. It was said that a local street performer had built his career on extreme tricks. He was normally just a sword swallower. He could apparently fit long balloons, metal rods, and even umbrellas down his throat. Crowds loved it. One day, during a performance, he decided to push the act further. He grabbed a folded umbrella and began swallowing it to show off his skills. While sliding the umbrella down, he accidentally pressed the automatic release button on the handle. The umbrella snapped open, while still in his throat. The crowd watched in shock. The performer collapsed instantly. It sounds like the perfect Darwin Award, but there's one problem. Nobody has ever confirmed it actually happened. Sword swallowers themselves later came forward to call the story impossible. A folded umbrella is far too wide to even fit down a throat. That leaves the umbrella trick as one of the most popular Darwin Award legends, but almost certainly nothing more than an urban legend. The falling dog. In 1988 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, a little poodle named Kachi was playing on a balcony. The dog was having fun when it suddenly fell off the railing. Kachi plunged 13 floors down to the street. The poodle landed directly on the head of 75-year-old Marta Espina, who was walking along the sidewalk. The falling dog killed her instantly. But that wasn't the end of it. A crowd rushed over to see what happened. A woman named Edith Solo came over to look at the scene. While Edith was distracted by the carnage, she walked into the street and got hit by a bus. She died too, but the chaos wasn't over yet. An older man saw all this happening and got so stressed out that he had a fatal heart attack on the spot. One falling poodle killed 3 people in 5 minutes. Kachi the poodle probably has the highest kill count of any dog in history. The bridge jump.
Grainger knows that if you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, you go.
On May 24, 2019, 2 friends from Texas were driving south through Lake Charles, Louisiana at 2 in the morning. Alejandro Cazares was behind the wheel. Roberto Moreno was riding shotgun. They came to a drawbridge that was up to let boats pass. A safety gate blocked the road. Most people would wait for the bridge to come back down. Not these guys. Roberto got out of the car and pushed the safety gate up out of the way. He jumped back in the car. Cazares drove under the gate and headed straight for the bridge ramp. They stopped for a second at the bottom. Then Cazares put the car in reverse, backed up, and floored it. They were going to jump the gap like in an action movie. The car went airborne for a brief moment. Then it crashed into the water below. The car sank to the bottom. Cazares was trapped inside and drowned. Moreno was found outside the submerged car, but he drowned too. The plastic bag beekeeper. In 2002, a Brazilian farmer found a beehive on his property, so he decided to get rid of them by using fire. The farmer put on gloves, long pants, and a long-sleeved shirt. He sealed everything with tape so bees couldn't crawl into his clothes. Then he put a plastic bag over his head and sealed it tightly around his neck. This would protect his face from bee stings. Finally, he grabbed a torch and went off to burn the hive. A few hours later, he hadn't come back. His worried wife went looking for him. She found him dead under the beehive, but the bees hadn't killed him. In fact, the hive was completely untouched. The plastic bag had worked perfectly. It kept out the bees, the smoke, and the oxygen he needed to breathe. The farmer had forgotten to poke air holes in the bag. With his gloves taped down, he couldn't rip the bag off his head. He suffocated trying to protect himself from bee stings. The lava lamp. In 2004, 24-year-old Philip wanted to use his lava lamp. He plugged it in and waited for it to start working. After a few minutes, nothing was happening. The lamp was still cold. Philip was impatient, so he came up with a brilliant plan to speed things up. He took the lava lamp and put it on his hot stove. There was just one problem Philip didn't know about. Lava lamps are only designed to handle temperatures up to 40 degrees. A hot stove gets way hotter than that. The lava lamp quickly overheated and exploded. Glass shards flew everywhere. One piece of glass went straight into Philip's heart. He died instantly. The chimney grenade. On January 13, 2005, 55-year-old Marco decided to clean the chimney in his workshop. He tried using a simple broom, but it was too small for the job. He needed to improvise. Marco figured he needed a chain to pull the broom through the chimney and a heavy object to weigh it down. Looking around his workshop, he found what he thought was perfect: a grenade. His plan was simple. He would weld the grenade to the broom and chain. Then he could pull the whole thing through the chimney. Marco got out his welding equipment and started working. He failed to think about what might happen when he put a flame near a grenade. As soon as the welding torch touched the grenade, it exploded. Marco was killed instantly. The chimney was left completely untouched by the blast. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments. The Pig That Lived. On July 4, 1991, 3 friends in Eaton, Ohio had been drinking all day to celebrate the holiday. At some point, they got hungry for fresh pork chops, so they drove to a nearby farm and stole a pig. They loaded the hog into the back of their pickup truck and took off. No rope, no cage, nothing to hold it down. The pig was not happy about this. As they sped along at 90 miles per hour, the pig started going crazy, kicking and thrashing around in the truck bed. None of the 3 men were wearing seatbelts. When the pig got ejected from the truck, the driver swerved to avoid it and lost control. The truck went off the road, and all three men were thrown from the vehicle. All three died. The pig survived. It walked away from the crash without a scratch. The farmer got his pig back, but the three men never got their pork chops. The elephant that came back. In June 2022, a woman named Maya Murmu was going about her day in eastern India. She lived in an area where humans and elephants often crossed paths, and that day, an elephant attacked her and trampled her to death. Tragic, but in regions where elephants roam free, these things happen. Her family prepared her funeral and placed her body on the pyre. Mourners gathered to say goodbye, and they thought it was over. It wasn't. The same elephant that had killed her showed up at the funeral. It walked straight toward the pyre, grabbed Maya's body with its trunk, and pulled her off. Then it stamped on her corpse over and over. When it was done, it tossed her body aside. The mourners ran and the elephant left. Nobody knows why it came back. Maybe it remembered her, or maybe it held a grudge. Either way, killing her once wasn't enough. The lawyer who proved too much. In 1871, a lawyer named Clement Vallandigham was defending a murder case in Ohio. His client was accused of shooting a man to death, but Clement had a theory. He believed the victim had actually shot himself by accident while drawing his own gun. It wasn't murder, just a clumsy mistake. He decided to prove it to the jury right there in the courtroom. Clement grabbed a pistol to demonstrate exactly how the victim could have accidentally shot himself while pulling out his weapon. He would show them step by step. There was one problem. The gun was loaded. Clement pulled the trigger during his demonstration and shot himself right in the abdomen, the same way the victim had died. He had proven his point a little too well. Clement died about 12 hours later, but his demonstration worked, and the jury was convinced. His client was found not guilty. The crocodile on the plane. On August 25, 2010, a small plane was flying over the Democratic Republic of the Congo with 21 people on board. One of them had a secret. He had snuck a crocodile onto the plane in a duffel bag. Why? No one knows. They were coming into land when the crocodile escaped from the bag. It ran through the cabin, and people saw it and freaked out. The flight attendant rushed toward the cockpit, and all the passengers followed. All the weight on the plane shifted forward, and the pilots lost control. The plane crashed into a house just short of the runway. 20 people died. The pilots, the flight attendant, and 17 passengers. All because one man wanted to smuggle a crocodile. There was one survivor who told police what happened. No one would have believed him otherwise. The crocodile also survived the crash without a scratch. It crawled out of the wreckage, and someone killed it with a machete. The rooster. On January 30th, 2011, a 35-year-old man named Jose Luis Ochoa was at an illegal cockfight in Tulare County, California. Cockfighting is when people strap knives to roosters and make them fight each other, and it's illegal in all 50 states. Ochoa was no stranger to the scene. The year before, he had paid $370 in fines after pleading no contest to owning or training an animal for fighting. During one of the fights, a rooster broke loose and started flapping around in a panic. It slashed Ochoa in the right calf. The blade cut a major artery. Ochoa was bleeding badly and needed to get to a hospital. But then police showed up to break up the cockfight, and Ochoa fled the scene along with everyone else. By the time he finally made it to a hospital, it was too late. He died about 2 hours later. Ochoa had trained roosters to kill. In the end, one killed him. The killer who couldn't swim. In 2017, a man and his girlfriend were having a nasty argument by the Havel River in Germany. Things got physical. He grabbed her and shoved her into the freezing water, expecting her to sink. The river was 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and his plan was simple. She would drown. There was one problem. She was an expert swimmer. She started making her way back to shore, and he panicked. His plan was falling apart, so he jumped in after her to finish the job. There was another problem. He couldn't swim. She made it to land and was rescued, but he didn't make it anywhere. Police pulled him from the river and rushed him to the hospital, where he slipped into a coma. They charged him with attempted murder while he lay unconscious in his hospital bed. He never woke up. He died on February 14th, Valentine's Day. The Atomic Wedgie. On the night of December 21st, 2013, in Oklahoma, a stepson named Bradley Davis, a Marine veteran, got into a fight with his stepfather, Denver St. Clair. The argument got heated. Neighbors heard them shouting. Then Denver said something about Bradley's mom. Bradley snapped. He grabbed his stepfather's underwear and pulled hard. He didn't stop, and he kept pulling until the waistband went all the way over Denver's head. You've seen this in cartoons. A kid pulls another kid's underwear up their back as a joke. Everyone laughs, and no one gets hurt. This was not a cartoon. The underwear wrapped around Denver's neck and cut off his air. He couldn't breathe. Denver St. Clair died from a wedgie. The police came and saw the marks on his neck. They ruled it death by asphyxiation, and Bradley was arrested and charged with manslaughter. He got 30 years in prison for a wedgie. The Garbage Chute Waterslide. On July 14, 2000, a group of friends came back to a Calgary apartment after a night of drinking. It was almost 3 a.m., and someone came up with a challenge. The building had a garbage chute that went straight down 12 stories. One of the guys joked that it would make a great water slide. Everyone laughed. Then a 25-year-old named Sheldon said he'd actually do it. He climbed into the chute and went down headfirst, beating the elevator to the bottom. But the ride didn't end in a pile of trash. It ended in the trash compactor, which turned on as soon as he landed. His friends rushed down and tried CPR until help arrived. It was too late. It was the worst water slide ever. The Hurricane Party. In 1969, Hurricane Camille was heading straight for the Mississippi coast. The government told everyone to leave, and if you couldn't leave, find somewhere safe. A group of friends had a different idea. They decided to throw a party. They wanted to watch the hurricane up close, so they picked a second-floor apartment right on the beach. The view was perfect. The location was not. Someone said the concrete foundation would keep them safe. They invited everyone they knew, and more people showed up. They had drinks, they had food, and they watched the storm roll in. Then the wave came. It was 24 feet tall and hit the building head-on. The walls ripped open, and the whole place fell apart, and everyone inside got swept out to sea. Hurricane Camille killed 143 people that night. 20 of them were at that one party. The Chimney Burglar. On November 27, 2015, 19-year-old Cody Caldwell decided to rob a house in Huron, California. The owner was away and the lights were off, so it looked like an easy target. But Cody didn't break a window or pick the lock. He thought he'd be clever. He climbed onto the roof and went down the chimney like Santa Claus. He got stuck halfway. Cody couldn't go up and he couldn't go down. He was trapped inside the chimney all night. The next morning, the homeowner came back. It was late November and it was cold, so he did what anyone would do. He lit a fire. Then he heard screaming coming from inside the chimney. He put the fire out as fast as he could and called the police. They came and pulled Cody out, still alive but badly hurt from the smoke and the heat. Cody died shortly after from asphyxiation. The Grand Canyon Prank. In 1992, a 38-year-old man named Greg Austin Gingrich was vacationing at the Grand Canyon in Arizona with his teenaged daughter. They were standing near the edge of a cliff, taking in the view. Greg decided to play a joke on his daughter. He started pretending to lose his balance, waving his arms around like he was about to fall. He wanted to scare her. His daughter was not impressed. She'd seen this joke before. She rolled her eyes and walked on ahead. Then Greg actually lost his balance. He fell 400 feet into the canyon. His daughter wasn't even watching anymore, all for a joke that didn't land. The Hot Sauce. On February 27, 2012, a 43-year-old man named Gary Banning was hanging out at a friend's apartment in Havelock, North Carolina. His friend was a mechanic who kept a jar of gasoline by the kitchen sink to remove grease from his hands. Gary saw the salsa jar sitting by the sink. It was full of golden liquid, and he thought it might be alcohol. He grabbed it and took a big gulp. It wasn't alcohol. It was gasoline. Gary spat it out. His mouth was burning and the gas was all over his clothes. He needed to calm down, so he went outside to smoke a cigarette. He burst into flames instantly. Firefighters found him badly burned, sitting on a charred carpet. He died the next morning at a hospital burn center. The investigator called it just a freak incident. It wasn't. The RC plane. Roger Wallace was 60 years old and used to race drag cars in Arizona. Then he decided drag racing was too dangerous and he needed a safer hobby. So he joined a radio-controlled airplane club. On May 18, 2002, Roger was out flying his RC plane with his club near Tucson. It was a nice morning, and the plane weighed about 6 pounds with a 5-foot wingspan. Then the sun got in his eyes. Roger lost sight of his plane and couldn't see where it was, but the plane was still flying and he was still holding the controller. He flew it directly into himself. The plane hit him hard. He never woke up, and he died shortly after. The club president called it the freakiest of freak accidents. He got killed by a toy plane. The dumpster nap. One night in July 2009, a 35-year-old teacher named Scott Williams went out drinking with his flatmate in Brighton, England. They hopped between pubs until his flatmate got kicked out of a bar for falling asleep. After that, the two got separated. It was raining hard, and Scott needed somewhere to shelter. He found a large wheelie bin, climbed inside, and fell asleep. The next morning, the garbage truck came. The driver didn't check inside. He lifted the bin and dumped it into the back of the truck, and the compactor turned on. It had happened before in Brighton. Twice, homeless men had been scooped up the same way, but workers heard them screaming and stopped the compactor in time. No one heard Scott. 2 days later, Workers at a waste transfer site found Scott's body among the rubbish. His flatmate fell asleep in a pub and got kicked out. Scott fell asleep in a bin and never woke up. The train roof. On June 11, 2008, two friends from North Canterbury, New Zealand wanted to get to Christchurch, which was 36 miles away. Cole Higginson was 25 and Nicholas Uprichard was 23. They didn't have money for a bus, so they came up with another idea. A freight train was passing through Waipara, and it slowed down as it took a corner. The two friends climbed on top of one of the wagons. Free ride, no ticket needed. Pretty clever, right? What they didn't account for was the railway footbridge near Blythe Road. It had less than 20 inches of clearance. The train was traveling at 50 miles per hour. It was nighttime. They
Wine and football can be complicated.
never saw it coming. A forklift driver found their bodies on the roof of the wagon when the train arrived in Christchurch. Both had died instantly from severe head injuries. A bus ticket would have cost them a few dollars. The grenade selfie. In 2017, a man named Alexander in Russia wanted to impress his girlfriend. He had a grenade, and for some reason he thought holding it would make a cool photo, so he sat in his car, pulled the pin out, held it up, and took some pictures of himself. Then he tried to put the pin back in. It wouldn't go back in. The pin is the safety, and once you pull it out, the grenade is live. Alexander thought it wouldn't explode as long as he didn't throw it. He was wrong. The grenade went off and Alexander died in his car. Police found his phone with the photos still on it. They ruled it an accident. He just didn't know how grenades work. The manhole. On February 2nd, 2008, a biology teacher named Lydia Tsakova was driving through Sofia, Bulgaria, with her husband and a friend. She had been doing chemistry experiments at home and had leftover chemicals she needed to get rid of, including bottles of diethyl ether and methanol. Both are highly flammable. The car stopped near a school in the Hadzi Dimitar district. All three got out, walked over to a drainage shaft, and started pouring the chemicals down the hole. The sewer was an enclosed space. The fumes built up fast. Something sparked and the whole thing went up. The explosion was so powerful, it launched the manhole cover into the air. It hit Lydia on the way up and took her head off. She died instantly. Her husband and friend survived, but were rushed to the hospital with severe burns. The friend fell into a coma. She was a biology teacher. She should have known better. The Tiger Fence. On a Sunday morning in December 2005, a mugger in Bloemfontein, South Africa, robbed a couple at knife point. Security guards nearby saw it happen and gave chase. The mugger needed to get away fast. There was a fence nearby, so he jumped over it and into the zoo. He ended up in the tiger enclosure. There were two of them. The tigers mauled him to death. A visitor to the zoo found his body later that day, covered in bite marks. The tigers had been fed the day before, so they weren't hungry enough to eat him. If they hadn't been fed, there would have been nothing left to find. If you'd like to see more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments. The Candyman. On October 31st, 1974, the streets of Pasadena, Texas were filled with trick-or-treaters. It was a cold, misty evening, and Ronald O'Brien wore a raincoat as he walked with his two children, 8-year-old Timothy and 5-year-old Elizabeth, along with his neighbor Jim Bates and Bates's two children. At one house, the children knocked but received no answer. Growing impatient, they ran ahead to the next home while O'Brien lingered behind. When he caught up with the group moments later, he produced 5 giant pixie sticks, claiming the occupant of the dark house had finally answered and given him the expensive treats. Back home that evening, Timothy asked if he could have a piece of candy before bed. His parents agreed, and he chose the pixie sticks. Almost immediately, Timothy complained that it tasted bitter. O'Brien quickly gave his son Kool-Aid to wash away the taste. Within minutes, Timothy began experiencing severe stomach pains. He ran to the bathroom, vomiting and convulsing violently. His father carried him as he went limp, rushing him toward help, but Timothy died in the ambulance. The pixie sticks contained enough potassium cyanide to kill 3 adults. Investigation revealed a horrifying truth. O'Brien was over $100,000 in debt and had held 21 jobs in the past 10 years. Just months before Halloween, he had secretly taken out $10,000 life insurance policies on both children. He had visited chemical supply stores asking about cyanide and lethal dosages. The man at the dark house was working at the airport with over 200 witnesses. O'Brien had hidden the poisoned pixie sticks in his raincoat sleeves. He gave them to his own children and 3 others to make it look random. The jury took 46 minutes to convict him. O'Brien was executed by lethal injection on March 31, 1984. Timothy's story is a tragic reminder that sometimes danger appears where you least expect it. I found this out the hard way when I searched my own name and email on the internet. Page after page of data broker sites had my private details, old addresses, phone numbers, even information about my family, all just sitting there for anyone to access. It feels violating. Data brokers collect and sell your information without your consent, making billions in the process. And while they're technically supposed to remove it if you ask, the process is so frustrating and complicated that most people just give up. That's where today's sponsor, Aura, comes in. Aura handles this automatically. They get your information taken down from these sites and they keep it off. I use Aura myself, and I recommend it to my family and friends because it's the only way I actually feel protected online. But Aura is much more than just data removal. It's a full digital security platform. It alerts you if your info shows up on the dark web, gives you real-time fraud alerts for your bank and credit accounts, and includes a secure VPN, antivirus, a password manager, and 24/7 US-based support. And if anything ever does happen, they back you with $5 million in identity theft insurance. It's honestly infuriating that companies profit by selling our private lives like products. That's why I chose Aura. And you can try it free for 14 days with my link in the description or the pinned comment. In just 2 weeks, you'll see exactly how much of your personal information is being exposed. I wouldn't go online unprotected anymore, and neither should you. Thanks to Aura for sponsoring this video. The Fake Trick-or-Treater. On October 31st, 1957, in Sun Valley, California, Peter Fabiano and his wife Betty had just settled into bed when the doorbell rang. It was after 11 p.m., far too late for trick-or-treaters. Nevertheless, Peter got up and went downstairs to answer the door. Betty heard him say, "It's a little late for this, isn't it?" A voice responded, "No." Then came a pop. Betty and her teenage daughter Judy rushed to the front door. Peter was bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound to his chest. He died almost immediately. The killer had worn a grotesque Halloween costume, blue jeans, khaki jacket, red gloves, and a domino mask with painted features. The figure had held up a paper bag concealing a handgun, fired once, then fled to a waiting car. Peter was a successful beauty salon owner and Marine veteran. When police asked Betty about enemies, she named Joan Rabble. Joan had worked at Peter's salon and became close with Betty. When their marriage struggled, Betty moved in with Joan. The relationship became romantic, but Betty eventually returned to Peter, agreeing never to see Joan again. Joan was devastated. She met Goldine Peitzer, a recently divorced medical secretary. Over 4 years of coffee mornings, Joan manipulated Goldine, describing Peter as vile, abusive, and evil. None of it was true. On September 21st, 1957, Goldine purchased a .38 caliber revolver. On Halloween, they dressed in disguises and drove to the Fabiano home, waiting until all lights went out. Goldine approached the door and shot Peter while Joan waited as getaway driver. 2 weeks later, detectives traced the gun to Goldine. She confessed immediately. Both women pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and were sentenced to 5 years to life. The Wrong Door Incident. On October 17, 1992, 16-year-old Yoshihiro Hattori and his American host brother Webb Haymaker were excited to attend a Halloween party. Yoshi, an exchange student from Japan who had arrived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana just 2 months earlier, dressed in a white tuxedo, imitating John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. Around 8 p.m., they drove to the neighborhood where the party was being held. Due to similar addresses and Halloween decorations, they mistakenly approached the wrong house. The boys rang the doorbell, but got no response and started walking back to their car. Inside, Bonnie Pear saw them through a side door. Startled by the costumed figures, she locked the door and told her husband, "Rodney, get your gun." Rodney Pierres grabbed a loaded .44 Magnum revolver. When he opened the carport door, he saw the boys returning to their car. He pointed the gun at Yoshi and yelled, "Freeze!" Yoshi, walking back toward the house thinking he'd found the party, didn't understand the command or notice the weapon. Webb saw it and shouted desperately after his friend. Pierres fired a single shot. The bullet pierced both lobes of Yoshi's left lung. He died in the ambulance minutes later from blood loss. Initially, police quickly questioned and released Pierres, saying he was within his rights. Only after Louisiana's governor and the Japanese consul protested was Pear charged with manslaughter. His defense claimed Yoshi moved in an extremely unusual manner that any reasonable person would find scary. The jury took just over 3 hours to acquit Pierre. Yoshi's parents sued in civil court and won $650,000 in damages. The Hayride Incident. On October 11, 2014, 17-year-old Cassidy Charette and several of her classmates arrived at Harvest Hill Farm in Mechanic Falls, Maine for a night of Halloween fun. They were there to experience The Gauntlet, a popular haunted hayride attraction. Cassidy was a top honor student at Messalonsky High School, ranking first academically in her class of 244 and a standout varsity soccer player. It was supposed to be a thrilling evening of harmless scares. The attraction used a 1979 Jeep CJ5 to pull a trailer carrying more than 20 passengers through the corn maze. Around evening, the Jeep began descending a hill. Suddenly, the vehicle went out of control. The Jeep and trailer flipped over, sending passengers flying through the air. Cassidy and her friends were thrown from the trailer violently. Several others suffered broken bones, ankle injuries, and abrasions. 22 people were taken to hospitals. Cassidy's injuries were the most severe. She died at the scene. Investigation revealed shocking negligence. The Jeep's rear brakes did not work at all. The front brakes were not functioning properly. The vehicle was hauling more than double its intended towing capacity. The brake fluid reservoir was empty, and several brake parts were missing or improperly installed. Employees had warned farm owner Peter Bolduc that the Jeep's brakes were faulty, telling him he should junk it. Bolduc had ignored the warnings. The vehicles went years without maintenance. In November 2016, Harvest Hill Farm pleaded guilty to a felony charge of aggravated driving to endanger. Cassidy's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which settled in 2017. The money went to support the Shine on Cass Foundation, established in Cassidy's memory. The costume incident. On October 31, 2020, the streets of Quebec City's Old Quebec neighborhood were quieter than usual due to pandemic restrictions. At about 10:30 p.m., residents began reporting a man in medieval costume wandering near the Parliament building. He wore black jogging pants, black leather boots, a short-sleeved kimono, and a black mask. At first, passersby assumed it was just an elaborate Halloween costume. Then, the screaming started. The man wielded a katana-style Japanese sword with a blade over 76 centimeters long. He attacked victims at random in at least 4 locations, including near the famous Chateau Frontenac Hotel on du Trésor Street and on des Remparts Street. Witnesses described chaos as people ran in all directions. 56-year-old François Duchesne, a museum employee, was killed. 61-year-old Suzanne Clermont, a hairdresser, was also killed. 5 others were wounded, some with serious injuries. The victims were chosen completely at random. After a 2.5-hour manhunt, 24-year-old Carl Girouard was arrested shortly before 1 a.m. When captured, he was lying on the ground, barefoot and hypothermic. He surrendered to police. Investigation revealed that 5 years earlier, in a medical context, Girouard had verbalized an intention to commit a violent act. Girouard told his trial that by age 18, he had hatched a mission involving killing people with a sword and creating chaos. He said there were 2 competing versions of himself in his head, including a bad version who took over on Halloween night. In May 2022, Girouard was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. The Egging Murder. On October 31, 1998, 21-year-old Carl Jackson was driving through the Bronx with his girlfriend Darlene and her 9-year-old son Clyde. They were heading to pick up Clyde from a children's party so they could all attend another Halloween celebration together. Jackson had just turned 21 weeks earlier. He was a quiet young man, son of a nurse and a postal worker, who worked as a data entry clerk at Morgan Stanley. As they drove through the neighborhood, suddenly an egg smashed against their car window, then another. A group of teenagers was throwing eggs at passing vehicles. Jackson stopped the car and stepped out to confront them. An argument erupted on the dark street. Voices were raised. Jackson, realizing the situation was escalating, turned and sat back down in the passenger seat. Then 17-year-old Curtis Sterling pulled out a gun. A single shot rang out through the Halloween night, striking Jackson in the head. He died instantly. A young life was snuffed out over nothing, Jackson's father told reporters. But that's what Halloween has gotten into. Jackson's mother Gloria said, "I think it took us 2 years to even talk about it. We were just devastated. We never thought that anyone from our family would be murdered, especially on a holiday for something stupid." Between 1984 and 2010, at least 24 people in New York City were seriously wounded or killed in stabbings, shootings, beatings, or accidents sparked by egg-throwing confrontations around Halloween. Curtis Sterling was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Every Halloween, Carl Jackson's mother sends Sterling a card telling him she's glad he was in prison, though he was released in December 2015. Napa Halloween Incident. On October 31, 2004, in Napa, California, 3 roommates spent the evening handing out candy to trick-or-treaters at their home on Dorset Street. 26-year-old Leslie Mazzara, a former beauty queen from South Carolina, 26-year-old Adrian Insogna, a civil engineer, and 27-year-old Lauren Mianza, a volleyball coach, laughed and chatted as they gave out treats. By 11 p.m., the trick-or-treaters had stopped coming. All 3 women went to bed. Leslie and Adrienne slept in upstairs bedrooms. Lauren's room was downstairs. Around 2 a.m., Lauren woke to the sound of breaking glass. Then she heard blood-curdling screams from upstairs. Heavy footsteps pounded through the house. Lauren listened in terror as the footsteps grew louder, coming down the stairs toward her. She ran out the back door and hid in the yard, barely breathing. She heard someone climbing out of the basement window and running off into the darkness. Lauren cautiously re-entered the house and made her way upstairs. What she found was a scene of horror. Leslie lay face down in a pool of blood, roughly 2 inches deep. Adrienne was near the back of the bed, barely alive and bleeding heavily. Lauren slipped on the blood as she frantically tried to escape and call for help. Both women had been stabbed multiple times. When police arrived, both were dead. Investigation eventually revealed the killer was 26-year-old Eric Koppel, who was engaged to Lily Prudhomme, a close friend of Adrienne's. Eric had attended the housewarming party when the women moved in. DNA evidence from the scene linked him to the murders. Eric Koppel was convicted and sentenced to 2 life sentences with no possibility of parole. The Cold Case. On the evening of October 30th, 1975, Mischief Night, 15-year-old Martha Moxley left her home in the Belle Haven section of Greenwich, Connecticut. It was the night before Halloween, when neighborhood youths would traditionally ring bells and pull pranks like toilet papering houses. Martha was a popular student who had moved to Greenwich from California just over a year earlier. She was excited to spend the evening with friends. Martha joined other teenagers at the Skakel house across the street. According to friends, Martha began flirting with and eventually kissed Thomas Skakel, 17. Later, Martha was seen falling together behind the fence with Thomas near the pool in the Skakel backyard around 9:30 p.m. Then, Martha disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, October 31st, Halloween Day, Martha's mother became worried when her daughter hadn't come home. A search began. That afternoon, Martha's body was found beneath a tree in her family's backyard. Pieces of a broken 6-iron golf club were found near the body. An autopsy indicated she had been both beaten and stabbed with the club, which was traced back to the Skakel residence. The case attracted worldwide publicity because the Skakel children were nieces and nephews of Ethel Skakel Kennedy, widow of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. For decades, no one was charged. Then, in 2000, Michael Skakel, 15 at the time of the murder, was arrested at age 41. He was convicted in 2002 and sentenced to 20 years to life. However, in 2018, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated his conviction. On October 30th, 2020, exactly 45 years after Martha's murder, the state announced it would not retry Skakel. The murder remains officially unsolved. Taylor Van Diest. On October 31st, 2011, in Armstrong, British Columbia, 18-year-old Taylor Van Diest left her house dressed as a zombie. She was excited to meet friends for one last Halloween of trick-or-treating before they were too old. Taylor was a 2011 graduate of Pleasant Valley Secondary School, an honor student, standout athlete, and lifelong volunteer who was beloved in her small community. Around 6 p.m., as darkness fell, Taylor began walking along railroad tracks toward her friend's house. It was a short walk she'd made many times before. She texted back and forth with her friend as she walked. The messages were normal, chatting about typical teenage topics. Then, at 6:01 p.m., Taylor sent a text that said she was being creeped or followed. That was the last communication Taylor ever sent. When Taylor didn't arrive, her friend became worried and called her repeatedly. No answer. A search began immediately with friends, family, and police scouring the area. 2 hours later, they found Taylor badly beaten and clinging to life along a quiet stretch of train tracks. She was rushed to Kelowna General Hospital, but died the next morning from her injuries. She had been strangled and bludgeoned with a heavy flashlight. Her head wounds were fatal. DNA found under Taylor's fingernails linked the murder to 28-year-old Matthew Forster from Cherryville. During interrogation, when officers asked, "Do you feel bad for killing Taylor?" Forster said yes. He confessed to hitting Taylor multiple times with a flashlight and leaving her to die. Forster pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 2018 and was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 17 years. Taylor and her family had never met Forster before that night. Christopher Jenkins. On Halloween night, October 1st, 2002, 21-year-old Christopher Jenkins left his apartment in Minneapolis dressed in a Native American costume. He was excited for a night of Halloween bar hopping with his girlfriend and another couple. Jenkins was a University of Minnesota business senior, captain of the school's lacrosse team, smart, popular, and well-liked. It was supposed to be a fun night. The group went to the Lone Tree Bar and Grill in downtown Minneapolis. Around midnight, Jenkins was kicked out of the bar for being too intoxicated. He left behind his phone, wallet, and jacket. The bouncer watched him take a left on Hennepin Avenue and disappear into the cold Halloween night. That was the last time anyone saw Christopher Jenkins alive. When Jenkins didn't return home, family and friends immediately became worried. They worked with police to search for him. On 2 separate occasions, bloodhounds tracked his scent from a pizza shop across from the bar to a parking garage. Drops of blood were found in the garage, but his scent ended there. Then the trail went cold. 4 months later, on February 27, 2003, a worker spotted something in the Mississippi River. Jenkins's body was found floating on its back between the 3rd Avenue Bridge and St. Anthony Falls, still wearing his Halloween costume. His oversized shoes were still on. His shirt was still tucked into his pants. His arms were folded across his chest. He had human hair clenched in his left hand. GHB, a common drug used to incapacitate victims, was found in his system. Police initially ruled it accidental drowning, but later reclassified it as homicide after receiving information from a jailed witness. In 2018, prosecutors said the case was not chargeable. The murder remains unsolved. The zombie bus incident. On October 10, 2014, 18-year-old Jeremy McSpadden arrived at the incredible corn maze in Hauser, Idaho for his first night of work. He was excited and nervous. The attraction featured a Zombie Slayer paintball bus where patrons would ride through the corn maze on a modified school bus, shooting at workers dressed as zombies with paintball guns mounted outside the windows. Jeremy, a tall and athletic West Valley High School senior, had been hired to play one of the zombies. His cousins and friends had been working there for weeks and told him it was great fun and easy money. Around 10:30 p.m., Jeremy was in position, ready to perform. His job was to emerge from hiding spots in the corn maze and pretend to attack the bus while riders shot paintballs at him. As the bus slowly rolled through the field, Jeremy emerged from his hiding spot and ran toward the rear of the bus to play his role. Then Jeremy stumbled. Multiple witnesses saw him fall forward, landing directly in front of the passenger side rear tires. The bus immediately ran over him. Due to the uneven terrain of the cornfield, the bus rocked and bumped constantly. Nobody on the bus realized what had happened. Many of the patrons believed it was just part of the ride. The bus continued moving away from Jeremy's location. Only when the role players began to reset for the next bus did anyone realize something was wrong. Jeremy McSpadden died at the scene. His aunt said the teens were told they would be paid $50 for each night. It was Jeremy's first night. His cousin had fallen under the bus a few nights earlier but was unharmed. No charges were filed. The Zombie Slayer bus attraction remained closed. If you'd like to see more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.
And that class is Bart.